Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Orphan Black Season 4, Episode 8, The Redesign of Natural Objects. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Orphan Black, so I'll have to give a spoiler warning for Orphan Black up to Season 4, Episode 8. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So this episode was surprisingly good. At first I expected it to be another cliche filler episode. It actually ended up being quite a monumental episode and really pushed the story forward. I was quite impressed with it and thought that they pulled it off quite well. So we begin our episode seeing Donnie in prison, which goes down exactly as one would expect, with Donnie trying to act all tough but being a dork about it. In fact, I was thinking things could have went way worse for him, but instead he comes across a neo-illusionist plant who is there to keep an eye on him. So it totally goes along with the idea that this whole thing was a setup by the neo-illusionist to get to Sarah and her friends, which I called last week. So they had the whole thing set up and would have a plant in prison ready in place to squeeze Donnie. So Felix arranges for his sister Adele to be Donnie's lawyer, and she meets with Allison and Donnie, where the creepy neo-illusionist guy is just staring at them the whole time. But as for Adele being Donnie's lawyer, I don't recall them ever saying that she was a lawyer. Maybe they did and I simply missed it, but in any event, I think it's rather ridiculous that she's a lawyer and find it a bit too over the top silly. However, I completely changed my mind about Adele being a neo-illusionist plant, as I now feel that that is clearly not the way that they're going with her, and what I had originally interpreted as clues were just red herrings. I'm not ruling it out entirely, but it looks now that she's just more of silly comic relief. And honestly, I don't think the show needs any more of the silly comic relief, as they get quite enough of that with Donnie. So I suppose I should talk about the storyline with Rachel and how she keeps seeing a swan, but I'd rather not, because as per usual I find her storyline the least interesting and totally not necessary and rather boring, so I'll just skip that. And so we see Mika make contact with Sarah and Cosima, right away through Kira, which quite surprised me, as when we first saw MK contact Kira in the previous episode, I thought they were going to make this an ongoing storyline where MK is communicating with Kira in secret, but instead they jump straight into her getting in touch with Sarah, which does beg the question of why, she just didn't contact them directly to begin with. So anyway, MK is a huge asset to Sarah and her group, as she's able to dig up all sorts of information on their opponents, and she gets Cosima and Sarah in contact with Susan and Rachel Duncan. So that they can get their help to find a way to defeat Evie Chow and come up with a cure. She also plays the video of the conference Evie had with Susan, where she states she wants to eliminate Sarah and all of the self-aware clones, so that Sarah and Cosima now know the stakes. And we later learn why MK all of a sudden decided to go back to Sarah and help her. It was because she's getting sick as well, so her time is short. Plus, I think seeing that video where Evie declared she's going after all the self-aware clones probably motivated her as well. So then Siobhan goes off the rails and goes off to kill Detective Duko, and Sarah enlists Art's help to stop her, and this is where I thought the episode would turn into a pointless filler episode all about Sarah trying to stop Siobhan from killing for revenge, and an ending with a heart-to-heart where Siobhan sees the error of her ways. But apparently I underestimated the show again, and they went in a much, much more interesting way. As when Siobhan goes to kill Duko, she instead finds him meeting with Allison, where he predictably tries to pressure her into giving up Sarah by using Donnie against her. So Siobhan makes Sarah aware of this, who then sends Felix to check up on Allison. However, right around this time, MK reports to Sarah that she found Duko's hidden accounts and all of the money, like millions of dollars, that he's received from Neo-Illusion. And here, I think, is where where Sarah missed a huge opportunity to squeeze Duko, and simply sending Felix to talk to Allison wasn't as good of a plan. So then we get these amazing scenes where Allison is rehearsing her play, where she has Felix on one hand reminding her, how, to stay true to her friend and sister Sarah, while on the other hand, Duko shows up and puts Donnie's life in danger, putting Allison in a very precarious situation, and so she goes ahead and tells Duko about the comic shop where Sarah will be that night. And so we get this amazingly tense scene where we see the neo-illusionist thug getting ready to kill Donnie while Duko waits outside the comic shop for Sarah to show up, and while Allison rehearses her play while being noticeably worried and freaked out. This was an amazingly tense scene that I loved, but I knew what was going to happen. But knowing what was going to happen didn't in any way diminish from how awesome this scene was. As it appears, Allison had given up Sarah when Duko spots her going into the comic shop, and he confronts the comic shop runner, which was a great tense scene, seeing Duko talk about Dungeons and Dragons, but with the subtext of "give up Sarah or I'll kill you." But just as I thought, Art, Siobhan, and Sarah ambush Duko and hold him at gunpoint, meaning the whole thing was a trap, and Allison was working with Sarah to set him up, and at gunpoint they force him to call off Donnie's would-be killer. Even though I kind of knew this would happen, I still thought this was really effective because they had been building up a potential conflict between Allison and Sarah all season, so I totally would buy that she might give her up in order to save Donnie. And plus, I liked how these scenes really showed how important Donnie is to Allison, and it was really great to see that relationship explored more and strengthened. To me, it makes Allison a much more believable and interesting character. So yeah, I absolutely loved these scenes. So once they have Duko, Art and Sarah simply leave to let Siobhan torture Duko for information, where she learns that Evie has a master plan to implant the slug bot into the general public by passing it off as gene therapy. However, we still don't know to what end because Duko didn't have that information. And once Siobhan learns that, she simply kills him, which I feel was not the right play. In fact, I'm surprised after that speech earlier about how Siobhan shouldn't kill a cop, that Art and Sarah simply left her alone with her, as they should have known that that's what she'd do. Also, since they didn't have all the information they needed, I think, again, they missed a real opportunity by not blackmailing him with the secret account, as MK could have simply stole his money just the same way she did with the other guy, and they could have held that over him to get him to work for them, although that would have been a risky proposition, as he clearly cannot be trusted, but to me makes more sense than simply killing him. I wonder how they're going to explain his death. I suppose, they'll simply make him disappear so that the authorities won't question it, but you think Neo-Lucian would be smart enough to realize what happened to him, but we'll see. That being said, it was really satisfying to finally see that smug asshole get his comeuppance. So then Cosima tells Sarah about a plan she came up with to find a cure by fertilizing an egg from Sarah with sperm from Ira to try to recreate the genes of the original by joining the Castor and Lita. And to that end, Cosima travels to Susan's freaky island in order to work with them to find a cure. Meanwhile, Susan says that she wants to go work with Sarah to remove Evie and reinstate Susan as the head of Neo-Lucian. So this seems really interesting, and I'm actually really anticipating these next few episodes, so thought this episode did its job of getting me excited for this show again. So my rating for the redesign of Natural Objects out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. I went back and forth on whether or not to give this episode an 8 or a 9, but I looked at some earlier episodes I gave an 8 to and decided this episode was clearly better than those, so it deserved a 9, as this episode was amazingly tense, and along with the other great episodes that came before it, has really reinvigorated my faith in Orphan Black as a show overall, which quite frankly I had lost a lot of faith in after season 3, as this is another powerhouse episode that was super tense by creating character stories that were built up to nicely and paid off in a big way, while setting up what looks like even more interesting storylines, and I can't wait to see it. So that's it for my review of the Redesign of Natural Objects. Be sure to check back here every week as I continue to review episodes of Orphan Black. Also be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, and more. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.